Well, are we seeing an AI bubble starting to appear? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, if you got a question for me, I want to invite you to go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. There's a lot of ways to get information. But specifically to ask questions, there's a couple of ways, and you can do that at the website, and we'll get you taken care of, whether it's a phone call that we need to talk through a few things more than an email can take care of, or if it's just an email question. I welcome you to send those questions in and we'll get you taken care of. That's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. We've got a lot to talk about. Before I get into today's topics, I want to talk a little bit about a webinar that I'm going to be doing probably in about 2 to 3 weeks. If there has ever been a must-attend webinar, I think it's this one, because basically what I'm going to do is explain what's happening with inflation. Is it going to go down? How long is it going to take? Where are these high prices going to settle out at? What's it all mean? I know I talk a lot about inflation on the radio, and I also know it's also very difficult to understand for one main reason, talking without visuals. That's, of course, goes along with radio. But it makes it a little bit harder to understand when you can't have a visual to kind of back up that understanding and that learning. So I'm going to be talking about that. Then I'm going to segue into what can we expect in November leading up to the election and on when it comes to the markets. I think it's very important to talk a little bit about that. Make sure your risk level is ready for that. And if you're unsure what your risk level is, you can always go to the website and take our risk assessment tool and send that in. It takes about 5 minutes, and I'll send you back as a personalized look at your risk level. It's one of 4 risk levels you could be. And I think that this is an extremely important thing to get about how you invest money. I mean, it's just very simple. It really should dictate everything that happens with your money. And so many people have no idea what their risk level is. This way you can get it. There's no cost. There's no obligation, no strings attached or anything like that, which can get you taken care of. So go find that, fill it out, send it back, and give me 24 hours, and I'll send you back an analysis of what kind of risk level you should be, what your score is indicating, and we'll get you taken care of. Very simple stuff. All at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. One of the things I think is important for investors to know, and I've had this conversation quite a bit here lately, and when I start having the same conversation over and over and over again, to me it's a nudge to, hey, maybe you should talk about this on the program. And make sure there's some understanding. You know, we're an education first about stewardship and the decisions that we make regarding stewardship and what God has blessed you with. And so education is just such the key. I think that's why so many people listen to our podcast, which is just a recording of our program, but it's in easy podcast form, and you can listen to it. We post it about 10 minutes after the program every day, or Monday through Friday. And you can go listen to it on your own at your own time. And you can get that at any platform that you enjoy using to listen to podcasts. And as they say, consume content. I always kind of like the way that sounds, consume content. I think it's extremely important to understand the difference between a bull market, a bear market, an investment bubble, and a crash. Because all 4 of them have significant consequences to them. And actually, my apologies. I would add. I don't know why I didn't do that, but I would add one additional scenario to this, and it's a correction. And I can't believe I left that one out because that's probably the most important one of them all. Let's start with the easy one, and that's a bull market. I think most people know what a bull market is. It's a market that goes up and it's strong. People are happy. They're making lots of money. The extreme bull markets are, it's easy to make money in America, easy to make money in the markets. No risk. Of course, that's not true because there's always risk in anything that you do. There's some small piece of risk. With the market, I would suggest there's a larger chunk of risk that goes along with it. But everybody pretty much knows what a bull market is. That's what we're looking at. And that is currently what we're dealing with. So there's a bull market. Then there's a bear market. Now, this is what's interesting is that I think that we've got to change the definition of a bear market a little bit to coincide with history. Because bear markets occur when the market hits a high in the as far as the stock market goes and declines 20% or more. And that 20% is a very important level. So if you have $100 and it drops 20% down to 80, that's a 20% drop. And once it gets over that 20%, then technically you're in a bear market. I would suggest that it's not a bear market because it hasn't lasted. I mean, most bear markets last a pretty long time. It's just like, for instance, the bear market that lasted 10 months and only dropped 29% in 2022, I would suggest that was a correction. Now, a correction occurs when the market loses 10 to 20% and it rebounds. I think that number should be expanded to about 30%, but the market doesn't really care what I think. But I personally believe that because the impact of a bear market is so much more than what it would do in a 10-month time period. But a correction is very important, and as a investor of stocks, you've got to be able to have that risk level as far as a loss to your investment account. And so, but they consider most corrections 10%, could go 15, may go 20. In fact, one of the more interesting things, I think this was 2018, the stock market in November and December had dropped, and it dropped all the way down until Christmas Eve day. I'll never forget this. It dropped exactly 20% and stopped dropping. Then on the 26th I think it was the 26th of December, it started taking off and going up and doing great again. That was a correction, not a bear market. So why is this important? Because there's a cycle of the way things work. And if you believed that was the bear market, then that means we're in a brand new bull market. And that means that for a long time ahead of us, we're going to have some good markets. I don't believe that that's the case. I believe that we are in an extension of the bull market we've always had, and we still have a pretty tough bear market ahead of us. Don't mean to be a gloom and doomer, just telling you what I think. A investment bubble is when a certain type of category, say real estate, or could be gold, could be fine art, could be tech stocks, could be anything, takes off in price. You remember like in 2000, the technology stock boom took off, and people are, the whole idea is, I don't care if it drops, it's going to go back up. It's a can't miss investment. And that's when you've got a bubble. It's pretty simple. So what they're comparing, they're talking about in the news media is a comparison between Nvidia, and RCA, the old radio company. And it's a narrative that has unfolded because both the radio industry had a big boom in the 20s, and artificial intelligence has a big boom right now. And so why this is important is we want to keep an eye on this, because it would, in the event that there is another bubble, we can start trying to figure out what that looks like and where the risk is, which is always extremely important, especially as a steward of what God's blessed us with. RCA was formed in 1919. And remember, no radios were around at that point. In 1928, and the stock market was alive and well in the 20s. Of course, there was the biggest stock market crash that started in 1929 that dropped the Dow Jones Industrial Average 86%. Pretty gruesome fall for the Dow Jones Industrial Average. But basically, the 1928, the RCA company just took off, and shares jumped nearly 400% from a low of $85 to $420 a share. And we'll get back to that in just a second. I want to make sure and catch this break. This is Bob Brooks. Stick around. I'll be right back. Hi, my name is Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show. So let me ask you a question. Do you know your numbers? Now, which numbers are those? They are your retirement numbers. That set of numbers is the single most important planning numbers you can know. Yet the majority of Americans don't even know them. Prudent Money Financial Services, sponsor of the Prudent Money Radio Show, specializes in figuring out those numbers and creating a game plan to make sure you're on the right track. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show weekdays at 3 p.m. on Bible School Radio 91.3.
Hi, I'm Jill Taylor, inviting you to join me each Saturday morning at 11 o'clock for Choose Life Radio. You'll hear people from across America sharing their stories of faith, forgiveness, redemption, and restoration. Choose Life Radio will encourage you to fully appreciate the gift of life. You may also find help for you or a friend in need. So please join me Saturday mornings at 11 o'clock right here on Bible School Radio 91.3.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. I was talking about the investment bubble that blew up in the 20s in the radio industry. And we're seeing the same thing with artificial intelligence led by NVIDIA. There's probably I think there's maybe 7 stocks that are just taking off, and NVIDIA, of course, is using is the number one stock out of all those stocks. I can't even remember how much it's gone up. It's gone up so much. I think it was 350, 400%, something like that. But here's the problem, and I'll illustrate it with a story from 1999. And in 1999 we were right in the middle of the big technology boom. And the internet was a big deal. All these technology websites, all these things were just exploding in price. And I went to an investment meeting with a friend of mine. I'll never forget this. And it was for investors to get them inspired to invest into this startup technology company, internet-based company. This company, I'll never forget, the guy walks up in front of the group of investors and hands out all these pamphlets, these reports, and basically they're projecting what this company's going to make. And of course, if you're projecting, you kind of go into it with rainbows and sunshine, and there's nothing wrong. I mean, you're going to make a lot of money, obviously, if you look at these projections. Projections aren't real. They are what we think they might be, and usually they are overdone. Well, the problem is that this company wasn't even listed yet on the stock exchange. Really hadn't even made a profit, hadn't made a dime yet, but people were pouring money into it because it's irrational. Investment bubbles, such as the stock market bubble, is irrational. People just lose their mind and they invest in things that are supposed to go up. And they're going to make all this money. They're going to get rich off of it. I mean, that was what happened to most of the stock market in the 20s. And they never end well because there's one problem. And the author of this article says RCA's path had more bumps in the road, in addition to periods of inventory gluts of radios. So they made all these radios, and they couldn't sell them. And the radio industry was trying to figure out how to make money from broadcasting and what the real business model is. And so that ended up catching up with them, as I talked about earlier about the stock price going from $400 a share to $82 a share during the big drop. But NVIDIA is having some of the same problems. NVIDIA being part of the artificial intelligence is that people don't really know what to do with it. It seems valuable, but what are you really paying for? And what's the estimate value of those projects? So one of the biggest differences, and this was interesting because I don't know that I completely agree with this because there is so much other types of manipulation going on in the market. But it says between the rise of RCA and NVIDIA was the element of market manipulation that existed in the 1920s. In the era before the Securities and Exchange Commission was formed in 1934, there were perfectly legal syndicates of investors who colluded to buy stocks like RCA, leaking positive stories to the press and driving up the price. So there was by the way, that was a high of $114 a share down to a low of $26 a share. Huge loss. And of course, as we know, the radio obviously industry survived and everything was worked out. But it was a bubble environment for sure. We're seeing this is turning into a bubble environment as well. The author of this article quotes a book that I've read, phenomenal book. You probably can get it off of Amazon if you look pretty hard for it because it's old. It was written in the 1970s. It's called The Day the Bubble Burst, and it talks about all these things and all the crime and the fraud that was going on at the markets. And that's why the Securities Exchange Commission, or the SEC, was so very important in getting put together, and you have a regulatory police force that monitors the markets to get rid of all the corruption that was happening. I mean, everything from people were able to borrow up to 100% of their account. And if their account dropped in value, which it dropped 86%, they had to sell more of the account to pay the loans off. I mean, you could go on and on some of the stories of people were ripping people off in banks, just all kinds of things. But the bottom line is bubbles don't end well. And before interest rates were starting to rise back, I don't know, I'm losing track now, it's a couple of years ago, something like that. There was what analysts were referring as the everything bubble. There were so many real estates, and I would suggest that the real estate's not so much in that bubble anymore, but they were in a bubble. It fits the definition. There's a lot of people that disagree with that, but that's what I think. The stock market is still hitting all-time highs. It is definitely in the bubble, and the bubble in the bond market is still not as strong as it was, but it's still there, and that's going to be an interesting situation as well. So I say all that to introduce, hey, there's a risk here you might want to watch out for. And as we always talk about, this is education first and want to make sure that you're aware of it. But I'll be talking a little bit about that at that webinar. I have not figured out a date. I will be doing that in the next couple of days. But this is, I think as we head into the elections, it's a must-see because you've got to get an understanding of what it means, of what inflation means today, because I don't think it means what it used to mean. And that's what's going to be important. Hey, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. You know, we've talked about online banks, and of course, up until this year, there really hadn't been any of that big deal about online banks. I think they're a novelty. They're cool to have on your phones, and the thought was, if my bank is if my online bank is FDIC protected, I'm okay. Well, maybe not. And this is a very unfortunate story about a company called Synapse that was a middleman in between the bank and the online connector of all these businesses together. I can't think of what they call it. But they're banking apps. So Synapse connected the online company with the actual bank, whereas things like PayPal and Chime partner directly with the bank instead of owning them. The appeal of these apps, like I said, is to save money, makes it fun, makes it easy. You get all really cool gadgets to go along with it. And this one person said something that just was an eye-opener. She said, there were times I would go buy something and get that purchase for free. That is something that is somewhat of a concern if you're getting stuff for free when you shouldn't be. Says today her entire life savings, $7,000, is locked up in a complicated dispute playing out in bankruptcy court. This company, Synapse, had to file bankruptcy. They're falling apart. Probably a situation where, well, I probably shouldn't say that. Usually you see some fraud going on. Who knows what the deal is here. But, FinTech, who promotes this kind of thing, FinTech promised the best of both worlds, the innovation, ease of use, and fun of the newest apps, combined with the safety of government-backed accounts held at real banks. But the widening fallout over the collapse of Synapse has revealed the promise of safety as a mirage. Starting May 11th, more than 100,000 Americans with $265 million in deposits were locked out of their accounts. And what Synapse did for these customers is they helped customer-facing startups quickly access the rails of the regulated banking industry. So they acted as a middleman. And so the problem being is that they turned off a critical system that was used to process transactions. So if you've got a middleman that is in charge of all the transactions and you don't know who owns what, they have to shut everything down. And now the question is, well, we've had bank failures in the past, so the FDIC should step in and bail out these customers, especially since they just did it a couple of years ago with all these 3 or 4 banks that went under. Problem is, the banks did not go under. So this was a problem of bankruptcy that there's no protection against on the middleman. And you've got the bank is still in business. The bank is still alive and well. So no FDIC protection, even though they saw it in some form on the bank, on the website of the company. It's a huge, huge mess. And it's so very important to understand, if you're using an online bank, does FDIC really cover? We'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on, but it's very important to know who you're banking with, and by all means, don't put your main bank at an online bank. I wouldn't. We'll talk a little bit more. Like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about this. I'm up against the end of the program. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.